I'm Sam Cox and I'm the Knowledge Officer for Legal and Welfare Rights at the Alzheimer Society. I've been at the Alzheimer Society since 2009 and I've had a few different sort of positions whilst I've been there, so including actually working on our helpline. And within that time, I've sort of seen and used the Equality Act and human rights law within my work, and that's also my academic background as well before starting at the Alzheimer Society. In my spare time, I have sort of volunteered and done other kind of work in like local sort of legal advice places and agencies, and also got involved with local sort of community dementia groups as well. So some of the sort of frontline work I've done in more recent years has been more in that volunteering. We've seen that where the law is mentioned and where it's used, then changes do occur and do happen for the better, so positive changes. And that's why it's so important for people to understand their rights, to know their rights, and not to be afraid of using them and saying them. And it can be quite odd because you might feel that you're labeling yourself by saying, for example, that you've got a disability, and it might not feel that you have. Absolutely. It shouldn't feel that way. But just the way the law in our country is set up is we have to use that terminology. And by using the right language, saying the right key words and key phrases can suddenly open up a lot of doors and make a lot of changes. So I always say to people not to be afraid of the language or the wording, and just to go with it and just to sort of push for the rights that we have. So some people have areas in one issue of their life, for example, it might be around employment. For other people, it might be about getting their health rights recognised or their rights to actually make their own decisions and their own choices. And the law is wide and covers all of these different areas. So whether it might be, do consider looking it up, trying to find out what the rights are. So reasonable adjustments often comes up in employment, and it does time and time again for people with dementia. And all too often we see where people think more about those physical adjustments that can occur. So from the ramps and from things such as ensuring they've got hearing loops in buildings, not very often thought about in terms of those memory aids or in terms of that assistance, or even in terms of things such as allowing somebody to go into work a couple of hours later so they avoid rush hour travel. And those are very simple reasonable adjustments that can be done. And again, when we've sort of spoken to people and people have been in these situations where, they're struggling a bit at work, but just need that extra little bit of support, we have found that, by just simply sort of thinking, right, what can you have? And then going to the employer and saying, these are the reasonable adjustments that I need and would like to have, can actually then suddenly get all these changes made. And we know that reasonable adjustments in employment have been around for years. So it's just nice now that people are recognising it more in the world of dementia and not just those physical disabilities. In terms of other examples, we see where sort of the law comes into action and is a tool that can be helpful. And so I think I've mentioned is a word of health rights. Now, I've been involved in some cases where it's seen that people don't have the same health opportunities as other people. Examples include other types of surgeries that people might need. So hip replacements, maybe where somebody's sort of needing other kinds of surgery. I've seen it for like hernia operations and things like that, where for some reason, because of the person's dementia, they're suddenly kind of dropped off that waiting list, or they're suddenly, moved further and further down. And the reason given is because of the dementia. That's wrong. It's discriminatory. It shouldn't happen. Any type of medical procedure should always be done on a case-by-case basis, taking into account that person, that individual, their needs, and what they need and what should happen for them. It shouldn't be about the label of their diagnosis. And again, in those cases, just by sort of having those conversations with the hospital or the GP or whoever, whichever medical professionals are involved, often has seen these kind of changes occur where suddenly somebody is invited for that referral, is seeing that consultant, is getting that operation. And that's really important. And again, it's just using the language of the law. Other times we might have to go a bit more formal, so go above just having conversations and actually put in those official complaints. And again, there's organisations there that can help with that and can support and ensure that that's done using the law, using that language, and getting that action made. And again, within those complaints, it's amazing how just seeing those words, Equality Act or Human Rights Act, suddenly gets those people listening and thinking, oh, we need to do something about this. And then again, the person's getting the rights that they're entitled to. Right, so reasonable adjustments, often we hear this more about employment, which is the example I myself often give, but it is there for everybody, and that is everybody in terms of people with dementia. So not just those with younger onset or an earlier part of their journey. We really do mean reasonable adjustments for everyone, including those at sort of the later stages and even towards the end of life. Reasonable adjustments are a whole host of things. So it's not, again, just about those physical improvements. It can be those simple things whereby we're allowing reasonable adjustments to help with sort of friends and family being able to visit somebody. You know, if somebody's got friends or family that maybe are abroad, it's about, you know, sort of ensuring, again, we've seen a lot of this because of the pandemic, but those digital ways of communicating, we see reasonable adjustments in terms of the language, what we use, even in care homes. You know, a lot of care homes are fantastic now and actually having menus that aren't just written menus, but picture menus. So that way you've got that adjustment of being able to use that different mechanism to communicate and to make your choices known. I've also seen those very simple things of literally having tea bags and coffee beans. So that way somebody can point and say what drink preference they've got. That is a reasonable adjustment, and one that's there for people at different stages. Reasonable adjustments can also be around appointments. You know, why does everything have to be digital nowadays? Why does it have to be a text message or an email? You know, there's nothing wrong with a good old-fashioned letter or even a phone call if that's going to be the best way to communicate with somebody. So there's so much more that can be done and so many more reasonable adjustments that can be made. We talk about human rights, quality rights, and other things. I think it can be occasionally misunderstood. And I've spoken to people that suddenly expect, you know, me to tell them to go on a protest march or to hold a banner or you know, sign a petition. Whereas really rights, in the sense we're talking about them, is a legal right to something. So it's your, you know, it can even be as simple as having the right to be in your own home, your right to go and see a friend, your right to have a friend visit you. And we're not talking about, say, those big, massive campaigning marches about, you know, about the new terminal of an airport opening up or something like that. We're talking about our everyday individual rights that we all have for being a person. And the reason why we mention them is just to ensure that we all get those rights that we are entitled to in law. And just as a very moral basis as well, that we're allowed to be human, we're allowed to have our rights seen. The rights agenda and the reframing of dementia as a disability to enable people to get their rights and sort of equal treatment is really important for carers as well. Carers are a backbone, are a support, are kind of key and really important in a lot of the work that we all do, and also for the carers themselves to still have their rights to their own family life and to be with the person that they care for and they love and want to be with, and to help and support as well. It really is important. Now, by recognising the rights of people with dementia, we are also helping carers. We're ensuring that carers are hopefully anyway heard, understood, that the plight that they have every day is listened to, and so that if the rights that the person with dementia is understood and the rights that they are entitled to are fulfilled, then it will make things easier for the carer. It will make sure that the carer is then able to care and to be a friend or a partner or a relative or a family member to that person, as well as doing the caring role that they've chosen to take on. And that's really important. We also find that carers themselves are discriminated against as a result of being a carer. This is something the Equality Act does recognise and does also give carers that right, that legal right, to not have to face this discrimination. But again, we do see it quite often. So again, carers also have their own legal rights. And again, they're entitled to them, they should be allowed to have them. And again, we encourage carers to use this discourse for themselves as well. So that people with dementia have the need for this level of support, of this type of treatment, or need this, need that, and carers have these needs as well. But when we look at it in terms of this discourse, and what we're talking about here is that we are talking about people's rights to have this. Their ultimate, you know, aim and their goal is to have this, this, and this, because they're allowed it in law. So it shouldn't, in some ways, we're not talking about needs anymore. We're talking about something that everyone has a right to. And that really is important. Because again, we're talking about what people should be getting. And so by instead of saying we need this, which can sound quite weak, if we say I've got a legal right to obtain this, it makes it a stronger argument, and then means that then you should be getting that support and that help that you do need, but you actually are entitled to it under the law. I think the first fundamental thing is to actually understand this, to be knowledgeable in this area, because putting out any unclear messages, inaccurate messages, doesn't help anybody, especially where people more and more will look to the internet, will look to media, will look to certain organisations for their information. If that isn't correct, that's not going to help anybody. So I think that's our first rule, is actually having that knowledge, having that understanding, and then putting that across in the work that we all do. So having either our own internal policies on it, whether people are fundraising or campaigning or doing anything in this area, is making sure that where these things are mentioned, that it's accurate.